If you post the same video from 10 accounts you own, and 8 of them get flagged in the same afternoon, that's not paranoia, that's a system working exactly as designed. Duplicate content detection is not about a platform being annoyed that you repeat it yourself. It exists because duplicate content is the cheapest, most reliable tell for a coordinated network. And once you understand what the system is actually measuring, you can stop guessing and start building a fleet that doesn't trip it by accident. I run proxy and cloud phone infrastructure out of Singapore for a living, and I manage account fleets for clients who need real separation between accounts, not decoration. I've watched flags roll in across a batch of accounts in real time, I've pulled the logs afterward, and I've had to explain to a client why the content wasn't the actual problem. The identity overlap sitting underneath it was. So this isn't theory I read somewhere, it's what I see happen on infrastructure I built myself, week after week. Platforms flag duplicate content because spam rings, engagement farms, and bot clusters almost always post the same asset or a barely modified version of it across a lot of accounts at the same time. That pattern is so consistent that content similarity became one of the cheapest signals a trust and safety system can compute. The system doesn't need to know who you are, it doesn't need a human reviewer looking at your face or your business license. It just needs to know that this video looks like that video, and that the accounts posting it also look connected to each other. If you're running a real multi-account setup, a client roster, a set of regional pages, a portfolio of brand accounts, you're going to run into this system whether you're breaking any rules or not. The fix people reach for first is usually a trick. Run the file through a converter, swap a few words, add a filter. That's the wrong instinct, and I want to walk through why. Because understanding what's actually being compared is the only thing that lets you build something that holds up over months, not just one upload cycle. Detection happens at 2 layers, and most people only think about one of them. The first layer is content fingerprinting. The second is metadata and behavior, and they get combined into a single score even though they come from completely different parts of the pipeline. The mistake I see constantly is someone solving for layer 1, changing the file itself, while leaving layer 2, the pattern of how and when it was uploaded, completely untouched. Both layers have to be addressed or the fix doesn't hold. For images and video, platforms run perceptual hashing, sometimes called p-hash, or their own proprietary version of it. And what that generates is a compact signature based on the visual structure of the file, not its raw bytes. Two files can have different file names, different compression, even different resolutions, and still hash to nearly identical values if the underlying frames are the same. For text, the equivalent is embedding similarity or shingling, where the system breaks your caption into chunks and compares them against a database of recent uploads, scoring how close the phrasing is, not just whether it's word for word identical. The second layer is metadata and behavior, and none of it requires anything as sophisticated as computer vision. Upload timestamps clustered within a few minutes of each other. Identical file creation dates buried in the EXIF data. The same source resolution, the same frame rate, the same audio track, the same posting order repeated across a set of accounts. It's pattern matching on boring mechanical details, the kind of thing a spreadsheet could catch if you handed it the right columns, and that's exactly why it's cheap for a platform to run at scale. Diran Handaitosh Abiditexum. Re-encoding a video, cropping 2 pixels off the edge, running a caption through a synonym swiper, none of that does much against p-hash style matching, because those techniques change the file, they don't change the structure the hash is built from. If your entire differentiation strategy is run it through a converter, you should expect the fingerprint to survive that step more often than it fails, and you'll find that out the hard way, after the flag, not before it. Now here's the part that trips most people up, and it's the one I see cause the most damage in real fleets. Duplicate content detection almost never fires on its own. It's a compounding signal. The classifier isn't only asking is this content a duplicate. It's asking is this content a duplicate and do these accounts look connected? When the answer to both questions is yes, the confidence score that triggers an action climbs a lot faster than either signal would justify by itself. That's why 2 accounts posting near identical content from 2 genuinely separate IP ranges on 2 different devices with 2 different browser fingerprints tend to get treated with more leniency than 2 accounts posting only slightly different content from the same subnet, the same device fingerprint, or a shared advertising ID. The content similarity is one input into the score. The identity graph is the other. Weak identity separation is what turns a borderline content match into a confirmed one. And that's a mechanical fact about how the scoring works, not a guess. This is the actual mechanical reason identity separation matters, and it's why I build fleets the way I do. Residential and mobile proxies out of real Singapore infrastructure, so each account exits through a distinct ISP-issued IP instead of a data center block that's already been flagged 1,000 times over by other operators sharing the same range. Antidetect browser profiles, so canvas, WebGL, font, and time zone fingerprints don't collapse into one obvious cluster the moment someone looks at 10 accounts side by side. Cloud phones running on genuine hardware, so the mobile side signals, device model, sensor data, install history, aren't uniform across the fleet either. None of that changes what your content actually looks like. And I want to be straight about that instead of letting you assume it's a magic layer. What it does is stop identity overlap from amplifying a content match into an account action. It's risk reduction on one half of the equation. It is not a guarantee on either half, and anyone telling you a proxy setup makes flagged content invisible is selling you something, not explaining how the system works. So if identity separation is only half the picture, the other half is making the content genuinely different. And that has to happen at the structural level the hash is built from, not at the surface level of the file. That distinction is the whole ballgame, and it's the part people skip because it's slower than running a script. Let's walk through what it actually looks like for video, for images, and for text, one at a time. For video, genuine difference means different framing, different cut points, different pacing, or footage shot from a different angle or a different take, not the same clip re-exported with a new watermark. Re-recording a voiceover with different phrasing changes the audio fingerprint in a way that pitch shifting the same track usually doesn't touch at all. Restructuring a post, a different hook, a different order of points, a different call to action changes the text embedding far more than swapping a handful of synonyms, because similarity scoring looks at semantic structure, not just whether the same words appear in the same order. For images, actual recomposition does more work than any filter. A different crop ratio applied before the hash is generated, different background elements, the subject placed somewhere else in the frame, that changes the structure the perceptual hash reads. A filter or a border changes the surface, and surface changes are exactly the kind of thing these systems were built from the ground up to see through, because that's the first trick everybody tries, so it was the first thing engineers trained their models to catch. I'll give you the honest caveat here because I don't think it helps anyone to pretend otherwise. None of this is a guaranteed bypass. You don't know the exact threshold any given platform's classifier uses, and that threshold shifts over time without any announcement. What you're doing when you genuinely restructure content is making it less similar, which happens to be the same thing the detection system is trying to measure in the first place. That's a fundamentally different posture than chasing one specific trick that defeats one specific hash, because those tricks tend to have a short shelf life. Never have traders new mampu. They're from workflow shortcuts that create overlap nobody actually intended, and once you see the pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. A shared media library where 3 different team members are pulling the same source clip. A scheduling tool that queues near identical captions across client accounts because it was fed the same brief. An editing template that leaves identical metadata baked into every single export it produces. Croissant Tiknin Vesin, if few habits fix most of this without adding real overhead to your process. Keep source assets and edited exports organized per account instead of dumping everything into one shared pool, so it's obvious the moment 2 accounts are about to publish something that traces back to the same original file. Stagger your publishing times on purpose instead of letting a scheduler fire everything at the top of the hour, because that clustering is exactly the kind of pattern the metadata layer is built to catch. Strip or regenerate file metadata as a standard step in your export process, not something you remember to do after a flag already landed. And treat identity separation, a distinct proxy, a distinct browser profile, a distinct device, as the baseline for every single account in the fleet, not a bonus for the accounts you consider important. That way, when content does happen to be similar for a legitimate reason, a shared brand asset, a required disclosure line, it isn't sitting on top of an identity signal that makes the whole thing look worse than it is. None of this is about hiding from a platform's rules, and I want to be clear about that because it's the point of the whole thing. It's about understanding that a duplicate content flag is really a network detection system wearing a content label. And if you only manage one half of what it measures, the content half, you're leaving the other half completely exposed. Manage both, and you're operating the way the system actually expects a real separate set of accounts to look. If you want to see exactly how I set up isolated proxies, browser and device environments for a fleet, that's the same infrastructure I've been describing through this whole video, and it's built specifically for this problem, not a generic setup I slapped a label on afterward. I run these farms myself, so when I point you at the proxies or cloud phones I actually use, you're seeing the real stack, not an affiliate guess. Full written guides and tested picks are up at multiaccountops.com, so go check those out. And if this kind of breakdown was useful to you, hit subscribe because this is exactly the kind of thing I cover on this channel every week.